In the royal capital of Seafort, Fate is performing guard duties outside the palace gate. Suddenly, his stomach begins to rumble thanks to his skill gluttony. Fate is cursing this useless skill when three holy knights from the Valeric family approach him. Their disdain for Fate is clear as water. One of the knights named Raphael is especially cruel towards Fate, who's already feeling nauseous. He orders Fate to stand up and be more vigilant. He then proceeds to throw Fate's wages on the ground and orders him to pick it up. While poor Fate is picking up his meager earnings, Raphael steps on his hand and calls him trash. The three holy knights then begin to kick Fate around while telling him to be thankful for having such a prestigious job. They want him to be grateful while they're using him like a punching. Raphael is about to slam Fate's head when Roxy Hart intervenes. She's also part of the Holy Knights, and she reminds the Valeric goons that these knights are supposed to be protectors, not thugs. Raphael is mad at her for butting in when he was having fun with his punching bag. Still, he doesn't want to fight her, so he leaves along with his siblings. Roxy immediately goes up to Fate to see if he's ugh, and Fate thanks her for saving him. She can ask him to report to her if anyone tries to mess with him again, but Fate says no. He knows reporting other knights will only make things worse for him. Besides, he doesn't consider himself worthy of Roxy's kindness. He considers himself a lowlife and wants Roxy to stay out of his miserable existence. That evening, he goes to the pub after his shift for a meal. The pub owner can see his declining health and asks him to eat well. But Fate says he can only afford some stale bread and soup with his income. He doesn't even remember the last time he had something nutritious like meat. Even the pub owner feels bad for the poor kid who's getting shit kicked out of him every day. He remembers how the last guard also faced the same torture at the hands of the Holy Knights. He just hopes that Fate won't end up dead like the last guard. Fate, however, is certain that he'll end up dead soon, especially since he's been working this horrible job for 5 years now. After all the shit he's been through, he doesn't think he'll last very long. On his way home, he's passing by the wall when he spots a bunch of burglars. He knows they're trying to sneak inside the wall and steal, so he decides to do something. Roxy is the one keeping an eye on this section of the wall, and Fate runs over to her. He tells her what's going on, and she believes him since he's always been honest with her. She leaves to deal with these thieves after asking Fate to keep an eye on the gate. Pretty soon, Fate can hear people fighting on the other side of the wall. He's worried about Roxy, but soon he realizes that he's the one who's actually in danger. One of the burglars manages to escape, and he's coming straight for Fate. The thief is injured, but he can still kill Fate since Fate has no battle skill. His instincts are screaming at him to run for his life, but Fate stands his ground. He remembers how Roxy put her trust in him and he won't betray her. So he gets ready and stabs the thief when he gets a chance. By some miracle, he manages to eliminate the criminal. Even he's shocked by this result. He's spacing out, wondering what just happened when his skill collection gets an update. 2 new skills named Telepathy and Identify are now in his inventory. Fate is really confused at this point. He used to believe that your fate in this world was determined at birth. If you were born with powerful skills, you could become a monster-slaying hero. On the other hand, if you were born condemned by the gods and had a useless skill, your life was going to be miserable. Fate always thought his skill Gluttony was worthless and he was one of the Forsaken. But now, after just killing one bad guy, his skills have increased by 100 times. And that's not even the best part. His new skill, Telepathy, is very strong. It allows him to read the thoughts of anyone he touches. He first gets to use this skill when Roxy comes back to check on him. As soon as she grabs his hand, Fate can listen to what she's thinking. She's really happy that he didn't get hurt, and he's glad to know that she really cares about him. She even wants to tell their superiors that it was Fate who spotted the burglars. She wants him to get some kind of reward for his bravery, but Fate doesn't want that. He knows that Raphael will only torture him if he finds out that Fate did something heroic. He also doesn't want Roxy to get involved with him any more than she already has. But Roxy isn't letting him go without some kind of reward, so she comes up with an idea. She asks him to work for her family and leave the guard job behind. Fate is hesitant to take up this offer. He knows that the Valerics would cause problems for Roxy if she helps him. Still, he can't help but admire her for her kindness. So he decides to leave his miserable life behind and work for Roxy. He is meeting her at the Hart family estate in a couple of days. In the meantime, he figures out how he got those skills. He used to think that his skill Gluttony only makes him hungry. However, he now understands that Gluttony consumes the souls of anyone he kills. It also sucks their skills and stats, which means Fate will get stronger every time he slays someone. He now has a way to get back at all those jerks who humiliated him for being weak. However, he would need a good weapon to kill any bad guys or monsters. And as if on cue, a weapon seller shows him his inventory. Unfortunately, Fate only has 2 silver coins to his name, so the weapon dealer asks him to get the hell out of there. However, before Fate leaves, the weapons dealer offers to sell him some old-ass weapons for those coins. Fate doesn't really have the luxury to be picky, so he starts checking out these old swords. He uses the Identify skill to check their durability, and this is when something strange happens. One of the swords speaks to him via telepathy and asks him to become its owner. Fate is surprised, but he ends up buying this jet black sword, and it proves to be a great investment. He immediately starts hunting down some goblins in the nearby woods. His new sword is slicing through these low-tier monsters like butter, while Gluttony keeps absorbing their stats. He also keeps talking to his sword, which is clearly sentient. It tells Fate that it was sitting in that trash pile because most people can't use it. In fact, you can only use this black sword after it chooses you, and now it has chosen Fate. As a result of his hunting, Fate is getting stronger and he's enjoying it. The life of a monster hunter is insanely better than that of a lowly guard, but he feels as if he's not getting strong fast enough. For some reason, he's stuck on level 1 even after massacring an entire horde of goblins. This is when the sword reveals something. It tells Fate that gluttony is one of the forbidden skills known as the skills of mortal sin. It absorbs stats and souls, but its user won't receive any experience, which means Fate is stuck at level 1. The sword also asks Fate to use this skill discreetly. Fate doesn't care about levels, but if he stays level 1, he won't be able to join any hunting party. He feels kinda lonely while hunting these goblins, but luckily he has his sword for some company, and the two of them spend the entire afternoon mowing down goblins. Fate returns to the capital in the evening to clean up and buy some new clothes. His hunting was rather successful. He took down 38 goblins, which earned him 3 silver and 80 copper coins. He feels great about this haul, but decides to buy tools to repair his sword after his adventures. The sword is actually very demanding. It wants Fate to polish it routinely and take care of it like his child. He even asks Fate to use its name Greed while talking to it. The two of them are lost in their conversation when someone bumps into Fate. He falls down and is frustrated at the guy who pushed him. The guy, however, is trying to run away while dragging a child. Fate grabs the child's hand and instantly finds out the little girl is being kidnapped. He uses identity to check the kidnapper, but that guy seems to have no skill. Still, Fate doesn't want to be reckless. He wants to help the girl, so he follows them. While Fate is determined to save the girl, the sword can sense that the kidnapper is actually a strong guy. It asks Fate to be careful, and Fate listens. He waits patiently while the kidnapper is tying the girl to a post. He tells the girl that her job is to entertain a holy night, so she should do her best to please the customer. He then walks out after beating the girl a little. Fate uses this opportunity to free the girl, but he walks right into a trap. The kidnapper knew he was being tailed, and now he wants to teach Fate a lesson. Greed asks Fate to run into the warehouse and hide among the wooden crates. Fate follows this plan while the kidnapper chases him down like a hungry predator. He thinks Fate is running away, but he's so wrong. Fate was trying to box him in a tight spot. When the kidnapper has nowhere to run, Fate goes for a slash and ends up breaking the kidnapper's sword. He then stabs the guy in the shoulder and asks him the name of his boss. The kidnapper is in a lot of pain, so he gives up the name Hado Valeric. Fate is shocked to know that his previous boss, Hado, is actually a psychopath who's using kids for his pleasure. Fate is extremely mad, and he kills the kidnapper. Gluttony immediately absorbs the kidnapper's stats and skills. Fate is shocked to learn that the kidnapper had such great skills. One of his skills, called Conceal, allowed him to hide his true strength. Meanwhile, he also had a very powerful sword-fighting skill called the Sharp Edge. As a result of this battle, Fate is now much stronger, but his level is still 1. He's bursting with rage at Hado's actions, but decides to first get the little girl to safety. He gets her back to her orphanage before getting back on the road. His next move is to start his job at the Hart family estate, and he's kinda nervous about it. Roxy's dad is one of the highest-ranking nobles in the country, and Fate will be working for him. He eventually makes his way to Roxy's gigantic home, where she greets him at the door. Fate's speechless after seeing her in a dress and tells her how beautiful she looks. His genuine compliment makes Roxy blush, and she immediately changes the subject to hide her nervousness. She's taking him to see her father, but they are going away from the house, and Fate soon learns why. It turns out Roxy's father died 5 days ago in a battle against a divine dragon. These otherworldly monsters come from the forbidden continent of Gallia, and the Holy Knights try to keep them away from human settlements. Fate feels so bad for not noticing any sadness in Roxy's behavior. He feels even more admiration for her since she helped him while dealing with so much grief. She tells him that she's the heir to the Hart estate, and she wants him to help her make this estate livelier. So for the next week, Fate throws himself into working as a helper around Roxy's estate. He's planting new flower beds and even getting friendly with other workers. He even gets a chance to eat meat after 5 years, and he can't help but enjoy every bite. But for some reason, he's always hungry. He never seems to be full even after eating 3 meals a day. It's even affecting his health, and Roxy notices it while he's having tea with her. She tries to check his fever, but he gets up nervously and faints due to his empty stomach. He wakes up after a while to see that Roxy gave her the day off. He doesn't know what's happening to him, so he asks Greed about it. And this is when he understands the true cost of using gluttony to get stronger. Greed explains that gluttony has now got a taste of souls and it wants more. So no matter how much Fate eats, he will never be satisfied. He has to keep consuming souls or he will die. He might also become crazed with hunger, in which case he'll just start biting people around him. This information disturbs Fate since he doesn't want to be a monster who bites other people. The sword tells him that whenever he's reached his limit, his eyes will change, and at that point, he has to consume a soul or face the consequences. With no other choice, Fate leaves to hunt some monsters to quench his thirst for souls. On his way out of town, however, he runs into a couple of guards who start making fun of him. They can't believe someone hunts monsters with such shitty gear. They think Fate is just another runt who's trying to make it big, so they try to bully him. Their tone changes, however, as soon as Fate takes over his hood to reveal those red beast-like eyes. Later that day, Greed is laughing at how those guards nearly shat their pants after seeing Fate's eyes. But Fate doesn't find it funny. He is more worried about how he felt when he saw those guards. He remembers feeling the urge to bite them like a rabid dog. Greed tells him that he was feeling this way thanks to Gluttony's hunger boost. The sword explains that when Fate is extremely hungry, the hunger boost will make him an apex predator. His stats will go up and he will be able to smell other people. His red eyes will even allow him to see stuff in total darkness. However, those eyes just aren't for night vision. They also make anyone with lower stats afraid of Fate. This fear paralyzes them, which explains why the goblins have been standing still in front of Fate this afternoon. Greed warns him to not let his guard down because the hunger boost will only last until Fate is hungry. Once he feeds Gluttony enough souls, this enhanced state will be gone. But so far he hasn't been able to fulfill his gluttony, and he's already slain dozens of goblins. Greed tells him that goblins are weak creatures, so Fate will have to consume a lot of their souls to satisfy his hunger. He can, however, try to hunt hobgoblins since they are much stronger. These stronger monsters reside in the nearby forest, and Fate decides to venture into it. He quickly runs into a couple of them, and he uses Greed to take their heads off in a flash. It's not long before he has taken out 45 hobgoblins, and now his relentless hunger has finally gone away. But it's already dark out there, and without the boost, Fate doesn't have night vision. Greed tells him to climb a tree if he wants to rest because sleeping on the ground will be dumb. That night while sitting in a tree, Fate wonders if he'll have to kill so many monsters every time he feels hungry. It's a tiring job, but Greed reminds him that if he doesn't kill, he will turn into a monster himself. Fate is thinking about this when suddenly a giant monster comes out of nowhere. It's holding a dead human in its hand, and the entire forest shakes under its feet. Fate is wondering what the hell is this behemoth when suddenly he remembers what he's looking at. It's a goblin king, and it's the first time Fate has seen one of its kind. Now this giant is way stronger than anything Fate has ever faced before. Fate is amazed by its high stats, but he's even more amazed by the health regen skill this monster has. Luckily for him, the Goblin King hasn't noticed him, which allows Fate to tail it quietly. Greed asks him if he really plans to take out such a strong monster, but Fate has made up his mind. He keeps creeping behind the oblivious giant. However, his resolve takes a big hit when the monster sits down and starts munching on the dead human. Fate feels nauseous and nearly vomits, but he controls himself. He doesn't want to let the monster know about his presence. Greed tells him to focus on the prize and go for it. Fate does just that, and with one clean strike, he cuts down one of the goblin's giant arms. He's amazed at his own strength, but this is when he gets careless. He gives the giant goblin the chance to attack, and that is exactly what it does. It hurls a huge wooden club at Fate, and he has to move quickly to avoid getting crushed. Fate wants to finish this monster ASAP, but that big club is keeping him away. This is when Greed tells him to stop running. A sword tells its master that it can cut down that wooden club, and Fate decides to believe his partner. He stands his ground and defends himself against that club. Just as Greed promised, the wooden club is no match for the black sword. Greed then asks Fate to finish things off with one final blow. So Fate takes a lunge towards the Goblin King while dodging its huge fist. In one swift blow, he cuts down the goblin's stomach and then cuts his head off to end things for good. He then activates Gluttony to scoop up all his bounty. This has been an insanely productive hunt for him since this single kill has doubled his stats. Fate is sitting down basking in the glory of his latest achievement when Greed throws him a curveball. The sword says that Fate can level it up using pretty much all of the stats he has right now. Greed goes on to explain that it has many levels and Fate will have to sacrifice more and more stats for each upgrade. While the thought of upgrading his prime weapon intrigues Fate, Greed's next words concern him. The sword says that it chooses its own wielder, and if Fate refuses to upgrade it, he will abandon him. Seeing as he pretty much has no choice, Fate decides to upgrade Greed, and this is how it gets the Black Bow. A few days later, Fate finds himself in the capital doing some window shopping with none other than his crush Roxy. He's finding it hard to believe his own luck, and he's blushing with excitement. He wonders how the hell he got into this situation. It all began after he slayed the Goblin King. On his way back from the woods, Greed asked him to trade the Goblin King's ears, but Fate wanted to use them in a better way. So he was running around town looking for something when suddenly he spotted Hado in some back alley. He was with his other two siblings, and Fate wondered what the Valorant Knights were doing in this shady part of town. Still, he was busy, so he let them be and quickly finished things up before returning to Roxy's estate. There, he once again threw himself into work like a good servant. He got into a routine of taking out weeds during the day and goblins during the night. Then this morning, he saw Roxy trying to sneak out of her own mansion. Fate tried to ask her what was up and nearly gave her a heart attack. He was surprised to see her dressed like common folks and asked her about it. This question made Roxy fluster, and she lied that she was going on a special inspection of the nearby markets as part of the Hart family tradition. Since Fate believed her every word, he thought she was really doing something important. He said good luck to her, but before he could get back to work, Roxy decided to make him her accomplice. She asked him to join her on this so-called inspection and practically dragged him through the gates. She even asked him to call her Lexi in front of other people during this secret mission. And that is how Fate ended up as Roxy's escort on this market trip. While the two of them are roaming around, Fate hears some folks talking about the Goblin Ear. It turns out Fate anonymously sent the precious ear of the Goblin King to the orphanage. He hears from the men that the nuns are trying to find the person who made this generous donation. While this news kind of makes him happy, the other one makes him concerned. The men are talking about how a fiend has been chopping down goblins in the nearby woods. The administrators have even dispatched holy knights to capture this fiend. Seeing as he is the one who killed those goblins, Fate feels as if he's being hunted. He knows he can't really hunt anymore without concealing his identity, so he buys a cheap mask from a nearby stall to hide his face. He's being careless and Roxy almost catches him with the mask, but Fate diverts her attention towards the gemstones that are on sale. Roxy is looking at all these gems like a child, and Fate can see that she's enjoying herself. So he uses his powers to help her win a gem, which she accepts gratefully. The two of them decide to continue this fun inspection, but soon they have to pay attention to an important matter. A little boy is crying on the side of the street because he's lost. Roxy tries to calm him down, but she frightens the kid and he starts to cry even louder. While Roxy is feeling heartbroken for making the boy cry, Fate quickly asks the kid who came with him to the market. The boy says he came here with his mom, and Fate promises to find his mom as soon as possible. The boy stops crying after getting this assurance from Fate, and the three of them start looking for the kid's mother. They feed him and even have fun together, but they have no luck finding his mom. They're about to give up for the day when suddenly a woman yells at them from a distance. She's the kid's mother and she thanks them for their help. As the boy goes home with his mother, Fate is once again reminded of the fact that he's on kind of a date with his crush. His face gets red like an apple and he asks her if she'd like to go back home. Roxy agrees to end this fun adventure and the two of them go back to her mansion. A couple of days later, some guards are inspecting the dead bodies of goblins outside the city. After looking at the carnage, they are certain that the infamous fiend is responsible for this, and their suspicions are soon confirmed when Fate appears in the scene wearing the mask. He is showing himself to lure holy knights. He has heard that Hado will be leading the party tasked with hunting him down, and he wants to make Hado pay. Unfortunately for him, however, his employer has other plans. Roxy takes him back to her country estate to oversee the harvesting season. She tells Fate that her lands are extremely fertile and they are known for their grapes. But good crops also bring in unwanted guests. She explains that kobolds are known to wander around her land during the harvesting season, so she always goes back to make sure these monsters don't cause any trouble. As soon as Fate hears about the kobolds, his stomach begins to grovel. So far, he's only been consuming goblin folk, so kobolds would be a nice change. Pretty soon, they reach their destination. Roxy is surprised to see her mother waiting for her at the gate. Apparently, her mom hasn't been well lately, so Roxy asks her to rest. But before they do anything, she introduces her new servant, Fate, to her mom, Aisha. Roxy's mom likes Fate's demeanor and asks him what he thinks about his new employer. Feeling grateful for all that she has done for him, Fate begins to shower Roxy with praises. He also promises to serve her till the day he dies. His compliments hit Roxy's heart, and she runs into the house to hide her red face. Meanwhile, Aisha asks Fate if her daughter has been able to deal with the loss of her father. Fate tells the older heart lady that Roxy has been exemplary in her job as a holy knight, as well as the new mistress of the harvest estate. Aisha is happy to hear that her daughter has been doing well, but she can't chat with Fate any longer. Her health begins to get worse, so she has to get some rest. Now that Fate has pretty much nothing to do for the day, he decides to walk around the country estate. He's going through rows of great wines when greed starts to annoy him. He decides to leave his companion behind and learn a few things about grape harvesting. Luckily, an older farmhand is around to teach him the ropes. Fate spends the afternoon picking grapes and making fresh juice to quench his thirst. He then sits down with the old man and asks him about the kobolds. According to the farmhand, kobolds come from a neighboring valley and few of them have already appeared on the estate. The old man feels bad about the death of the former lord of the Heart Estate and hopes that Roxy is Ak. Fate is starting to see how much Roxy is loved around here. After some chit-chat, Fate says goodbye to his acquaintance and once again begins to roam around. This is when he comes across a strange visitor. It's a girl carrying a giant axe, and from her tattoos, Fate figures out that she's a Gallian. While it's rare to see Gallians around these parts, Fate isn't captivated by her ethnicity. Instead, he is looking at her eyes, which remind him of his own when he's extremely hungry. He's trying to see her stats, but as expected, she hides her strength. Fate is so lost in trying to gauge her that he fails to respond when she calls him. She says that she's looking for kobolds too, but she will let Fate kill them. She then walks away after telling Fate that she'll see him later. Fate is left confused by this encounter, but he comes out of his daze when he hears Roxy calling for him. She is there to invite him for dinner, and she too is intrigued by the Gallian. She says that after the monsters invaded Gallia, most of its inhabitants died even though they were extremely strong. As she drags Fate back for dinner, he asks Greed if the girl is also on hunger boost. Greed tells him to wait until she approaches him again. The sword then advises its master to hunt kobolds soon if he doesn't want to reach his limit once again. Fate spends the rest of that day hanging out with Roxy, and he's actually enjoying the warmth of the countryside. However, he's also starting to feel those dreadful hunger pangs that remind him of his need to consume some souls. So with things getting to their limit, Fate decides to go hunting that night. He knows Roxy will send the kobolds running away from her estate the next morning, so he has to feed tonight. Luckily, it's not long before he finds a big group of mean-looking kobolds. There seems to be enough of them to satiate his hunger, but it's not all good news. While doing some scouting, Fate and Greed notice a strange-looking kobold. This one is twice as strong as any other kobold and even has a name. Greed explains that only special monsters called crowned beasts have unique names, which means this one is quite strong. In fact, Greed believes the kobold known as Howl is stronger than even Roxy. This information concerns Fate because now he has to kill the special kobold, or it will cause havoc for his beloved employer. But Fate also knows that he can't just attack that kobold. It's so damn strong that Fate will become its dinner before even landing a single blow. For a moment, Fate thinks about retreating, but after thinking about Roxy and her family, he decides to man up. He knows he can't beat Howl straight up, but he has a plan. He intentionally lures the lower-ranked monsters towards himself. He takes them into the woods, which provide him a lot of cover. Where the kobolds have gathered in an open area, Fate rains down arrows on them using the black bow. This new weapon is extremely special. Its arrows follow the enemies, which means Fate snipes every one of those poor kobolds in a flash. He then quickly consumes their stats using Gluttony, which gives him a huge stat boost. He knows that there are still more than 36 kobolds roaming around in the area led by Howl, so he decides to continue using this plan of ambushing lower-ranked kobolds. He wants to stay away from Howl until he's strong enough, but that is a dangerous plan. There's a good chance he'll get slaughtered, but he's willing to take that risk for Roxy. For a while, his plan works. He takes out more runts and even kills one of the stronger kobolds. If he can slay one more strong kobold like that one, he'll be equipped to face Howl. But this is when his luck runs out. Out of nowhere, the crowned beast pounces on him and swats him like a bug. Fate is astonished by its speed and raw power as he picks himself up from the ground. He is thinking that his time is up, but lucky for him, one of the stronger kobolds tries to finish him off. Fate uses this God-given opportunity to slay this kobold and consume its stats. This much-needed power boost finally brings Fate on par with Howl, and now he's ready to face his toughest opponent so far. He immediately goes to take Howl's head off, but he soon learns that he can't get into a fistfight with this monster. Howl's special skill Brawl makes him pretty much invincible in close range. One of his attacks is called Ruinous Strike, and Fate knows that he'll be crushed if he gets by that. He's wondering how to attack this special kobold when Greed offers to help him. The sword asks Fate to give up 10% of his current stats, and in return he can use Greed's special attack on Howl. Seeing as he has limited options, Fate agrees to sacrifice his stats, and that brings out Bloody Ptarmigan. This is a special kind of arrow that instantly blows Howl away. It's so damn strong that even Fate is shocked. He has literally reshaped the land in front of him while taking down all the kobolds. With all this precious bounty in front of him, Fate starts consuming. He even gets the coveted Brawl skill from Howl's dead body, but before he can use it, something cracks inside him. He grabs his neck and begins to scream like a banshee. Gluttony is trying to take hold of his mind. Greed tells him to calm down before he becomes a vicious monster, but Fate is enjoying this euphoric state. After listening to Greed's warning, however, Fate somehow manages to get out of the feeding frenzy brought on by Gluttony. By the time daylight returns, Fate is back at the mansion while Roxy is looking for kobolds. She finds pretty much all of them slain mercilessly near her estate, and the massacre leaves her speechless. She doesn't know what kind of freak skill can destroy the land like that. Needless to say, she's really frustrated by the time she returns to the mansion. However, her face lights up when she finds Fate waiting for her outside. She asks him why he was so tired this morning, and Fate has to lie that he was restless last night. He couldn't possibly tell her that he had been mowing down kobolds while struggling with his epic hunger. When Roxy tells him how sad she is about the destruction of her land, Fate even feels kinda guilty. After all, using Bloody Ptarmigan was really overkill. Still, he did it all to protect his employer, so he feels justified. He asks Roxy if she has suspicions as to who might have done all of this. As far as Roxy is concerned, only the Galleon girl could have caused so much chaos. After all, the Galleons are known to be stronger than even the Holy Knights. While the situation is a little confusing, Roxy is happy that someone finally dealt with all those nosy kobolds. Because of this, she doesn't have to protect her crop this year, but she still decides to stay for a couple of days to make sure the harvest goes smoothly. So the two of them spend 2 more relaxing days in the countryside, and then they decide to go back to Seafort. Fate is taking the luggage to the carriage when Aisha comes to have a chat with him. She's sad that her daughter is going back so soon. The two of them are talking when Aisha's health condition starts acting up once again. She tells Fate that she isn't gonna last much longer and she wants someone to be there for her daughter. She has noticed how Fate and Roxy look at each other. She asks Fate if he'll want to be Roxy's partner for life. While this proposition makes Fate happy, he feels he isn't worthy of being with someone so high-ranking. This is when Aisha tells him that she is also a commoner like him. She says that social status doesn't matter as long as you love someone. Fate is thinking about what to tell her when Roxy drags him to her carriage. But just before they leave, Aisha asks Fate to visit her again and give her an answer the next time he visits. For the next few days, Fate keeps thinking about what Aisha said to him. He knows that his heart wants to be there for Roxy, but he also knows that she doesn't truly know him. He hasn't told her about gluttony and how it makes him feel unfulfilled all the time. Things are getting so rough that now he feels hungry even after slaying dozens of low-level monsters. He knows that gluttony wants something stronger, but there are no strong monsters around. Eventually, his hunger starts showing through his eyes. In the beginning, it's only his red eye that's changed color. At this point, Greed asks him to do something about his hunger before he goes full wacko mode. But Fate doesn't know what to do. For now, he decides to hide his strange eye with an eye patch. Then one afternoon, he notices that Roxy is acting strange after coming back from the castle. He doesn't want to ask her what's wrong, but he feels worried about her. That night, he's back in the pub where the bartender is happy to see that he's alive. However, he's also sad that Fate's new employment might not last long. He informs Fate that a new expedition for Gallia has been announced and Roxy has to lead it. Fate can't believe his ears. The Hart family has already lost one man in Gallia, and now they're sending his daughter on this suicide mission. Fate doesn't understand this madness, so the bartender tells him a secret. He says that the Hart family is loved by commoners, which makes other families envious of them. So the other elite families led by the Valerics nominated Roxy for this dangerous mission. Fate understands now why the Valerics were sneaking around town a few days ago. They were convincing other holy knights to vote in their favor. At this point, his rage is reaching unprecedented levels, and then he hears something that makes him smile. Apparently, Hado is heading out to the forest to hunt the fiend. So Fate quickly grabs his mask and meets Hado for a much-awaited get-together. Fate quickly takes out the hired thugs that Hado brought with him. After witnessing his insane power, Hado is shaking, and this is when Fate finally reveals his face. Hado is confused and doesn't know how someone like Fate could get so strong. Fate tells him that holy knights have to pay for hurting someone he loves, and Hado is just the first one to face the consequences. While Hado is shocked by Fate's strength, he is still the proud son of the Valeric family. He quickly gets ready for battle and asks Fate to come at him. Fate uses his identity skill to check Hado's stats. Hado is at level 30 and his sword is also a relic, but according to Greed, Hado is dead meat, so Fate goes for the kill. Hado tries to block the black sword, but Fate is too fast. He breaks Hado's sword and mocks him. He then remembers how Hado and his siblings used to kick him around. To give this scumbag a taste of his own medicine, Fate starts throwing Hado around like a ragdoll. He's so consumed by his anger and hatred for the Valerics that he doesn't even stop when Hado begs him for mercy. Instead, he starts reminding the Holy Knight of his unholy acts against guards, orphans, and Roxy. He says that Hado deserves no mercy before flinging him high into the air. He then asks Greed for not one but 3 shots of bloody ptarmigan in exchange for 30% of his stats. His greedy weapon happily obliges, and Fate fires those insane arrows right at Hado, who gets blows out of the sky. A little while later, Fate finds Hado sitting in a pool of his own blood. He has lost his arms and legs, but he's still alive. He tells Fate that he didn't force Roxy to go on the Gallian expedition. He claims that she happily accepted the role after they nominated her. While Hado believes this information will absolve him of all his crimes, Fate says he already knew Roxy took the job as an honor. She's a holy knight in her heart, and she accepted this suicide mission to save the people of this nation. Hado asks him one last time for mercy, but Fate is hell-bent on getting revenge. He cuts down Hado's throat and consumes his stats. He then immediately sacrifices all those stats to upgrade Greed to its 2nd level. This time, the Dark Sword turns into a scythe which can cut through anything its master desires. Even though Fate ended up using all his stats for upgrade, he did get something out of this fight. He received Hado's Holy Sword technique, which makes him a Holy Knight. However, Fate knows that the bratty members of the Holy Knights group won't accept a commoner like him. The next day, Roxy leaves for Gallia, leaving Fate behind. He wants to go with her, but he can't reveal the source of his immense power to her. However, he can't really let her go alone either. So he comes up with a plan. He resigns from his job as a servant on the Hart estate and starts following Roxy's adventure party. He gets on a carriage that takes him to the southern town of Tetra, which is known for being a trading hub. Fate saw it when he was a child, and he decides to stay the night and get some information. Like most adventurers, the first place he visits is the pub. But outside the establishment, he finds a man begging other adventurers to help save his village. Fate looks at him closely and realizes that the guy's name is Set, and he used to live in Fate's village. Looking at a familiar face from his past reminds Fate of his troubled childhood. He grew up in a small village near Tetra. His mom died giving birth to him, and his dad was the only one who loved him. Fate's skill gluttony made him an outcast, but his dad protected him. But that all changed when Fate was 5. His dad passed away due to a sudden illness, and he was left alone in this world. Instead of taking care of him, however, the villagers decided to throw him out. They burned down his family home and pushed him out of their village, leaving him homeless. And now, after all these years, he's standing in front of the kid of the village chief who threw him out. What's even crazier is that Set is asking for his help to save the same villagers who did all those unspeakable things to Fate. At first, he doesn't want anything to do with Set or his beloved village, but then he remembers that his parents are still buried in that village. He does feel some emotional connection to that place, even if he doesn't want to believe it. He also knows that he has to keep feeding Gluttony or he'll go insane. So with all of that in mind, he takes up the job and agrees to help Set. Since he doesn't want to waste even a second, the two of them start walking to the village. Now, even though Fate still loves his childhood village, the villagers remind him that he's not welcome. Set's dad also doesn't think that Fate can kill any monsters. To him, Fate is still a useless child. Their hatred for Fate is so strong that they don't even believe Set when he explains how Fate defeated many monsters on their way to the village. By this point, Fate is done. He wants to go back and leave these hateful idiots to their fate, but Set asks him to stay the night. He apologizes profusely for his father's words, and Fate agrees to stay. That evening, while Fate is having supper, he notices Set talking to his daughter. Set says that the monsters took his wife, so now he's the only one taking care of his child. This scenario reminds Fate of his own childhood, and he feels bad for the father-daughter duo. Set says that he was following his father's orders when he pushed Fate out all those years ago. He says that he was a foolish child who didn't know better, but now he feels horrible for all his actions. Fate finally forgives him and asks him to explain what these monsters look like. Set says that the monsters have large claws and they can fly. This information is enough for Greed to determine that the village is plagued by gargoyles. While the thought of fighting gargoyles excites Fate, Greed's next words get him running for the door. According to the Black Sword, gargoyles are extremely smart predators. They scout their prey for days by doing small attacks. Then on cloudy, moonless nights, they swarm their target by attacking in large numbers. Fate knows the conditions are perfect for such an ambush, and his hunch is correct. Outside Set's house, he finds himself staring at these monsters that are trying to light the entire village on fire. One of the flying predators notices Fate and sends a fireball in his direction. Fate instantly brings out his new scythe and cuts through even the fireball. The scythe can neutralize magic and energy-based attacks, which makes it worth all those stats. The gargoyles realize that small fireballs won't hurt Fate, so they form a group and go for the kill. They send a giant fireball in his direction, but they miscalculate. Fate uses this chance to kill all of them in a single move. He sends his scythe flying towards them, and before they can react, they are falling out of the sky. But not all the monsters are dead. Their leader still hovers over the village, looking at Fate with bloodthirsty eyes. It creates a huge fireball on its hand and dives straight towards Fate, who's standing on Set's house. Since he doesn't want Set to get hurt, he decides to stand his ground and finish things off before anyone else gets killed. As soon as the gargoyle is in range, Fate swings the scythe with all his might. The dark weapon cuts through not only fire, but also slices the gargoyle warrior in half. And just like that, the fight is over. Fate quickly activates Gluttony to scoop up all those stats. He gets fire-resistant skills from the leader of the herd, and his gluttony is satisfied. So overall, it was a successful detour. But Fate can't really be happy about any of it. The village has pretty much gone along with most of its inhabitants, so Fate spends the night helping the survivors. The next morning, he visits the graves of his parents. He remembers how his father always used to smile in front of him even though he was going through a lot. His father's memories motivate Fate to keep seeing the good in things and forget about the rough life he had so far. Before he leaves the village, he meets Set, who lost his father in the last night's attack. He says that he wants to leave the village and work in the city to find a better life for his daughter. However, he wants one more thing for Fate before they go their separate ways. He wants to atone for all the dumb shit he did as a kid, and he wants Fate to punch him. Fate is hesitant, but Set insists. Fate knows that he can kill Set if he uses all of his strength, so he holds back as much as he can. Still, his punch is enough to send Set flying, but he's oak, and their latest interaction ends on a sweet note. That afternoon, Fate is traveling on a wagon to the next city when the wagon driver asks him how strong he is. Fate says he's as strong as a young holy knight, which makes the wagon driver laugh. He asks Fate to not make such bold claims when they get to the next city. That town is run by a holy knight who'll hang Fate for making such a big claim. The two of them are discussing this holy knight when they have to make a sudden stop. Some bandits are standing in their way, and they want everything inside that wagon. The driver asks Fate to do something, but he doesn't get the chance to intervene. The red-eyed Galleon girl mops up the lowly criminals before Fate can even figure out what's going on. She then says that Fate owes her since she let him have those kobolds at the Heart Estate. Fate is wondering what to say to her when she climbs into the wagon with him. Fate is really surprised to learn that she already knows about his special skill, Gluttony. This is when he asks her to introduce herself, and she tells him that she's mine and she carries Wrath, which is a number skill of mortal sin. After traveling for a little while, Fate reaches a grand city with his new companion. Unfortunately, Mine isn't in the mood to wake up right now, so Fate has to carry her through the city streets. As they walk by the giant white walls, Ree comments how the city reeks of oppression. But Fate isn't really in the mood to discuss the faults of the city. He wants to know who Mine really is, and it turns out Greed knows about her. However, the sword doesn't want to talk about her past, and Fate stops asking. Greed does, however, tell Fate that Mind's weapon is also a sentient one. In fact, it's another weapon of mortal sin like greed. The Black Sword goes on to explain that weapons of mortal sins are very special, and Mind's weapon can change its weight, allowing her to deal a tremendous amount of damage with every blow. The more Fate learns about her, the more troublesome she seems, but right now he has bigger concerns. While walking through the streets with Mind on his back, he gets stopped by a couple of guards. They say that only the citizens of the town are allowed to go past this point. They also show Fate some uncanny marks on their necks. Apparently, every citizen has this mark, and the type of mark determines his or her status in society. The guards ask Fate to stay at the Traveler's Inn on the other side of town, and Fate agrees. However, he's kinda pissed that such a discriminatory system is put in place in a fine town like this. By now, he's certain that the Holy Knight running this town is actually a tyrant. After walking for quite a while, Fate gets to the inn, and it looks grander than anything Fate has seen so far. It also sees a hunting party going for some nighttime adventuring. Greed says that adventurers often use night vision to hunt in the dark. Fate is wondering what's there to hunt around here as he enters the inn. It looks even better from inside, and the clerk tells him that it has 2,500 rooms. Fate asks her about the hunting party, and she says that those men are hunting salmon in the nearby desert. The salmon cause the desert to expand, so they need to be kept in check. The thought of hunting a new kind of monster makes Fate really excited. He quickly checks into a room to get rid of Mind. Greed warns him that he shouldn't do anything to make the Galleon girl mad because her wrath can wipe out entire cities, but Fate thinks it's a joke. He leaves her behind and goes straight to the desert to see these sandmen. By the time he gets to the desert, however, he's facing half starvation. His one eye is already turning. Greed tells him that he has to learn how to control gluttony or he will lose his sanity. While Fate agrees with his sword, he doesn't know how to control his insane hunger. This is when Greed comes up with an idea. The sword tells him to learn to sustain the half-starved state. If he can control the half-starved state, he won't be going into the fully starved state so damn easily. So tonight, Fate will have to slowly consume these salmon while staying in this hungry state. He agrees to follow this plan, and they soon come across a salmon. It's a weird monster that has a fire weakness skill. Fate just acquired the fireball skill after killing those gargoyles, and now is the perfect time to test it. So he sends a fireball towards the weird monster but misses his mark. It's definitely hard to throw these fireballs accurately. Fortunately, Greed comes in to help him once again. Using its bow form, Fate can shoot fire arrows with extreme precision. In fact, he takes out a salmon in a single blow. He quickly consumes it and then sits down and waits. It's hard to be patient, but he does his best to consume the salmon as slowly as possible. After a few hours of this rough training, Fate is done and Greed tells him to go get some rest. The sword says that if Fate pushes his hunger too hard, he might go berserk, which isn't something that Fate wants. However, before he leaves, he wants to truly fulfill his hunger. Right now, he needs 30 of these salmon to satiate gluttony, but there's also a quick way. The adventurers he saw earlier are fighting a crowned beast which is much stronger. The adventurers are likely gonna perish, but Fate can save them while getting a good meal for gluttony. So he runs to their aid. The adventure party is pretty much in shambles by this time. They have figured out that they bit way more than they could chew by attacking such a strong monster. The crowned salmon is over level 50 like the crowned kobold that Fate faced earlier. The entire adventuring party is about to be wiped out, but it all changes when Fate shows up. He tells them to get the hell out of there if they don't want to get caught up in the crossfire. The adventurers can't even fathom how one man can defeat such a strong monster, but for some reason, Fate is extremely confident. He's so confident in his abilities that he decides to not use bloody ptarmigan for this extermination. Instead, he wants to improve his close combat skills. So he charges like a maniac to destroy the core of the salmon. He soon has to come back to his senses, however, as the monster fights back. He launches giant sandstones towards Fate and even entangles him in quicksand. Fate is getting his ass kicked by this tricky foe, and in a moment of desperation, he agrees to pay the price for Greed's special move. Greed takes away 20% of his stats in exchange for an even stronger version of the bloody ptarmigan. This new move is so devastating that it blows away the salmon along with every particle of its being. When it's all said and done, Fate is standing in front of a giant hole in the ground along with the core of the crowned salmon. He doesn't waste any time and quickly absorbs the essence of the special grade monster. Unlike last time, he doesn't give in to the euphoric state brought on by gluttony. Instead, he calmly collects this sweet bounty. But he's not out of the woods yet. Showing such unimaginable strength is going to make him look suspicious. He's afraid that the adventurers will call him a monster or a fiend. But to his surprise, they start singing his praises. Apparently, the sand monster was expanding the desert for hundreds of years. In all this time, not a single adventurer or holy knight managed to kill it, but Fate has done it. He has single-handedly removed the plague that was consuming farmland in this part of the country. In return, he has received this big core which looks really heavy. Luckily, the adventurers promised to bring it to the city for him as a sign of gratitude. Even though he is used to hunting alone, Fate is liking all this attention and praise. By the time he comes back, it's already morning and he passes out. He wakes up late in the day and is positively horrified to see the beard that Mind drew on his face. While he's mad at her, his anger is instantly replaced by embarrassment when she comes out of the shower practically naked. While Mind feels no shame in showing her body, Fate's hormones are making him way too nervous. He begs her to put something on as they have to collect the bounty for his kill. And what an amazing bounty it is. Fate gets paid 100 gold coins for killing that crowned beast. He has never even dreamed of having this much money, so he doesn't know what to do with it. He notices that Mine is eyeing those coins and he asks if she needs some. She says that she hunts crowned beasts and sends the money to help her poor village. Seeing as it will go towards a good cause, Fate agrees to give her half of that bounty. While the clerk is dividing those coins into 2 purses, she remembers that the Holy Knight was looking for Fate. She says that Fate has gotten rid of an extremely pesky monster, so the Holy Knight likely wants to recruit him. While it looks like a good offer on the surface, Fate is not interested in serving a man who segregates his people into classes. He just wants to get the hell out of this strange town. But it's too late. The Holy Knight is already inside the inn. What's worse is that Mine is talking to him. And as if things hadn't gone south enough, Mine doesn't appreciate his rude behavior and sends him flying into the air with a single blow. Fate knows that now they have become enemies of this town, so he drags her out of that city, and they're back on the road. For a while, their journey goes as well as they could hope for. But when they're halfway to Gallia, their wagon breaks down. The driver thinks it will take a couple of days to repair it, and Fate should find accommodation in the nearby village. Fate is looking to have some rest as well, so he walks into the village with Mine. He's amazed by how calm and peaceful this little village is. Since it's so close to Gallia, it should get attacked often by the monsters, but that doesn't seem to be the case. Reed thinks that the village must have a strong protector, and it's not long before Fate runs into him. The guy's name is Aaron, and he is extremely strong. He asks Fate to spar with him, and Fate soon realizes that Aaron is in a league of his own. He's at level 180 with stats over 3 million. Greed believes this old man is stronger than even some of the top-rank Holy Knights, but despite his intimidating strength, Aaron seems like a great man. During their sparring, he notices that Fate isn't great at using his own strength. He's especially weak in close combat, which seems like Aaron's specialty. Aaron also finds it peculiar that Fate is still at level 1 despite his stats topping 2 million. After gouging this outsider, Aaron makes a proposition. He says that Fate can stay in the village only if he agrees to train with him. Fate is confused by this offer. Why would such a strong warrior want to train him for free? He doesn't know what Aaron is thinking, but he takes the offer since he really does want to learn close combat. Since he's staying in the village for only around 3 days, Aaron decides to start his training that very same day. He takes Fate to his home and they begin sparring without swords. Aaron says that unarmed training is the best way to control your stats and hone your power. Fate asks him what he's doing in a small village like this. With his strength, he could be overseeing a big town, but Aaron says he never wanted to rule any place. He just loved killing monsters, and this place was as good as any to start his campaign. However, when he wiped out all the monsters in this area, people started coming here. Pretty soon a village formed around his residence, and he had no choice but to become its representative. Fate asks him why he left his job as a holy knight to kill monsters. This question makes Aaron open up. He says that while he was busy exterminating monsters in Gallia, his wife and son were killed by monsters. After losing everything, he decided to devote his life to slaying these evil creatures. He says that he wants to teach Fate because he wants to leave some part of himself behind. Fate feels sorry for the old knight, and he decides to learn everything he can from him. The two of them continue to train, and soon Fate's body is reacting better than ever, but he's still in half-starved state. He has to focus to control his hunger, but he eventually slips, and his eye changes color. Even Aaron notices it, but he doesn't force Fate to explain what's going on. Instead, they continue training, all the while Fate is thinking about consuming the monsters in a nearby castle. Aaron teaches Fate all the basic stances of close combat, and then hands him a wooden sword. He wants Fate to parry his attack with that wooden stick. Fate thinks it's absurd, but Aaron has faith in him. So he goes to slice Fate in half with his real sword, and in that moment, Fate's training kicks in. He immediately figures out what angle he should use to defend, and it works. Aaron is extremely proud of him, and Fate is also feeling great. He finally understands how to control the immense power he has. On their last evening in that village, Aaron makes dinner for Fate and Mine. He says that while Fate is clearly a novice, Mine is a true warrior. She says that Fate would have to train for 1,000 years to come to her level. This comment confuses Fate since he knows humans don't live that long. He wonders if Mine is even a human, but he has no time to worry about these things. He has finally reached the limit of his half-starved state, and he has to consume monsters right now, or he'll go berserk. He asks for Aaron's permission to leave the castle. He also asks why Aaron has spared the monsters in that castle if he really likes killing them. This is when Aaron reveals a shocking truth. He says that the castle is where his family died. Now it's under the control of a lich lord who also happens to be a crowned beast. This crowned beast has the ability to control the dead, and he uses Aaron's dead family as shield against him. But now that Fate is going with him, Aaron feels like he can finally defeat the evil monster that's plaguing this village. So the two of them leave for the castle while Mine stays behind to protect the village from any monsters. Aaron is surprised to see that Fate also has night vision, and he wonders what other powers this young guy has. With the help of their night vision, they can see that the castle is crawling with skeleton warriors. They also look quite strong. Aaron is especially worried about the skeleton archers since Fate can't really protect himself against arrows, But this is when fate surprises him again. He brings out the black bow to smite these archers from a safe distance. Aaron is amazed by Fate's shape-shifting weapon. Fate says that he will wipe out those archers in no time since every arrow he shoots will hit the mark. But there's a problem with his plan. The arrows can't really kill the skeletons since they're already dead. Fate will have to use an elemental magic attack. He thinks about using fire arrows, but he's afraid that he'll end up burning down the entire castle. Luckily, he has recently acquired Sandstorm, which is another skill that uses elemental attacks. So he combines it with his arrows, and the result is devastating. Every arrow was turning the skeleton warriors into sand statues. Aaron can't even believe his eyes since he has never seen anyone combine magic with arrows. He asks Fate to keep the archers at bay while he deals with the rest of the skeletons. He then proceeds to bring out his special attack, Grand Cross. This high-energy burst blows away pretty much all the skeletons in their way. This time it's Fate who's left speechless by Aaron's strength. Aaron tells him to keep moving since more and more skeletons are coming their way. While fighting his way through the horde of undead, Fate notices something. The castle is in impeccable shape, as if someone has been taking care of it. Greed believes that the Lich Lord behind all of this is actually an extremely intelligent crowned beast, so Fate shouldn't just charge in or he might fall into some kind of a trap. Greed's words keep Fate on his toes as he slowly approaches the inner gate of the castle. For some reason, all the skeletons have stopped pursuing them. The two of them walk slowly into a hall that is not only well lit, but looks to be in great condition. Inside the hall, Aaron finds something unbelievable. His son and wife are standing in front of him along with the rest of his family. The boy looks a lot like Fate. While Aaron runs in to meet his long-lost family, Fate knows he's falling into a trap. He knows that the crowned beast is using Aaron's feelings for his dead family to make him vulnerable. Greed says that the people he sees in front of him are a result of a skill called hallucination. Fate tries to warn Aaron about the danger, but it seems to be too late. The boy is about to stab Aaron when suddenly Aaron snaps out of his trance and protects himself. He finally remembers that his family is dead and what he's looking at is a cruel trap to kill him. His dead family members tell him to join them. They try to make him feel bad for letting them die, but Aaron doesn't flinch. Fate thinks about helping out the old man, but that's when he remembers something. He remembers that gluttony consumes souls. He asks Greed what happens to those souls, and the Greed's answer horrifies him. The souls consumed by gluttony are in an eternal hell. Fate doesn't want any innocent person to end up in purgatory, so he decides not to kill any of the undead members of Aaron's family. Instead, he asks Aaron to deal with them while he looks for the crowned beast. Thanks to his hunger boost, his sense of smell is really heightened. He can practically smell the raid boss inside the hall, but the Lord Lich is hiding. This game of hide and seek doesn't last long, and eventually, Fate finds him. This is when the crowned beast reveals its full form. It's a hideous being that uses a giant scythe to kill. Its stats are also more than he expected. The Lord Lich is a level 100 monster with every stat over 1 million. Greed says that it's a good opportunity for Fate to use his new training, and Fate agrees. He decides to get as close as he can to this monster before dealing the final blow. His movement is much better this time around, and in no time he's breathing down the monster's throat. But the Lord Lich is a cunning monster. It figures out that Fate doesn't want to hurt any innocent dead person in the room. So the Lich uses these dead souls as a shield against Fate. This evil plan is working since Fate doesn't know how he can kill the monster without consuming some poor soul. Luckily, the cavalry arrives just in time. Aaron has already immobilized his family members, and now he's ready to deal with this devil. Seeing his resolve gives Fate a much-needed boost of confidence. He joins Aaron and goes to use the Holy Grand Cross attack, which won't hurt any soul. Greed doesn't like that attack, but allows it this time around. With both of them going all out, Lord Lich is taken down without it can even move a muscle. Aaron immediately goes back to his wife and son to say a final goodbye. He promises that he will do a lot of good things and make them proud. While he's saying his goodbyes, Lord Lich tries to make a run for it, but Fate won't let it run. He consumes it using gluttony, and this time the euphoric feeling is much stronger. He has received a spirit boost and magic boost in addition to all those stats. For a moment, he loses his control but recovers, thanks to the training he's been doing these last few days. By the time he's done feeding gluttony, Aaron's family has vanished. Aaron now feels determined to restore the town around his castle. Right now it's full of monsters, but Aaron believes he can kill them all. Fate asks why he's feeling so confident, and this is when Aaron reveals something insane. He says that he has breached the skill cap he was born with. Now he feels as if his strength has no limit. Fate doesn't believe that someone can go past their fixed level cap, but Greed says it's possible. The Black Sword explains that if the owner of a skill of mortal sin trusts the person who's fighting alongside them, that person can get a boost to their level cap. So Fate unintentionally helped the old man get even stronger than he already was. Fate feels good about it, and he decides to help Aaron clean up the town. This new task, however, takes longer than expected, and they return back to the village a day later than promised. They're not surprised to see that Mine is pissed. Aaron had promised her 50 gold coins to protect the village for a day, but now that she had to work for 2 days, he has to cough up 100 coins just to escape her wrath. That afternoon, Fate and Mine finally decide to resume their journey to Gallia. However, before they get on the road, Aaron asks Fate to visit him after returning from Gallia. Apparently, he has something important to tell Fate. Fate is intrigued, but he wants to get to Roxy, so they get on the wagon and leave. After a couple of days, they are walking in the deserts of Gallia. Since Fate owes Mine a favor, she asks him to help her slay a powerful monster. Fate tries asking her more about this mystery monster, but she keeps her mouth shut. While walking through the sandy wasteland, Fate is dreaming of getting to the city of Babylon where Roxy is stationed. He has to quit daydreaming soon when a whole party of orcs attacks them. Fate has never seen these monsters before, and he's shocked to see that they fight in an organized group. These monsters are smart, and they're firing arrows. Fate doesn't know how to get close to them, but Mine has a plan. She hits her weapon into the ground so hard that a dust cloud surrounds everything in a big radius. This cloud obstructs the vision of the orcs and allows Fate and Mine to get close enough. Once in range, they begin to wreak havoc on these relatively weak monsters. After the battle, Fate compliments Mine for her quick thinking, and it makes her blush. She asks him to keep walking and keep his eyes open at all times. Soon they reach what looks like the ruins of an ancient city. She says that the monster she wants to hunt lives here. Fate asks her what this place even is, and she says she was born in this village. She couldn't live here for long since she was moved to the capital of the Gallian Empire. This one piece of information shocks Fate. The Gallian Empire has not been around for nearly 4,000 years. He can't believe that Mine is so damn old. He wants to ask so many questions, but his mind goes blank when they come across a giant egg. Before Fate even asks what it is, Greed answers him. The Black Sword explains that what Fate is looking at is a failed experimental monster created by the Gallian Empire. It's a chimera known as the Mech Angel. These horrifying creatures were created by combining a bunch of monsters with a divine core. Most of these unhinged monsters were killed off thousands of years ago, but apparently one survived. Fate uses Identify to learn that the monster's name is Haniel. One look at its stats and Fate is wondering how the hell can they even kill it. All of its stats are close to 30 million. But Mine explains that it's in a larval state and right now they can finish it off. However, this monster won't die if you just kill its body. You also have to kill its soul. That's why Mine needs Fate's help. She goes on to say that gluttony is the most vile of all the skills of mortal sin. Its very existence is unnatural since it breaks all sorts of laws created by God. Its user can keep getting stronger as long as they keep consuming souls, but there's also a catch. Most of its users go crazy pretty soon as they are consumed by their own skill. Her words only add to Fate's already mounting anxiety, so he asks her to get on with it. So Mine jumps into the air and strikes at the center of the egg. It instantly cracks open and a huge mechanical-looking monster comes out of it. While the monster itself is very intimidating, what truly scares Fate is the girl inside the monster's chest. She has the same red eyes as his own when he gets hungry. And since the monster is of higher rank than Fate, the girl's stare is making him too afraid to fight, so he stops looking at her. Mine tells him that the girl isn't a human and she is that monster's core. Fate has to strike her and consume her soul. Fate is hesitant, but he agrees to follow orders. But before he can even get close to the giant monster, it sends a wave of lava in their direction. Fate thinks about cutting through it with his black scythe, but Greed says that won't work. Luckily, Fate's not alone in this battle. Mine comes to help him and she uses brute strength to create a hole through the wall of lava. She asks Fate to distract the monster with his arrows and keep his distance. She'll attack it head-on and create an opportunity for Fate to consume its soul. So Fate begins firing sand arrows at the mechanical monstrosity. His arrows cut off Haniel's limbs, but before Fate can even celebrate, the monster regenerates. Greed tells him that it will keep regenerating forever and Fate has to consume its soul to kill it. So Fate waits for his chance and watches Mine go to work on Haniel. Her attacks are extremely powerful and they keep getting stronger. Greed explains that it's all thanks to her weapon Sloth, which allows her to strike with more power the more she swings it, but it also has a downside. The longer she fights, the slower her movements will get. Still, for the time being, she is easily breaking down Haniel's body. Fate keeps assisting her, and it looks like they'll soon be able to take out the core. But this is when the monster surprises them. It begins to scream so loud that Fate's ears are about to burst. He wonders what's going on, and Greed gives him bad news. According to the Black Sword, Haniel has figured out that it's going to lose this fight eventually. It knows that it's weak, so it is trying to evolve into its next form. Fate warns Mine about it, but it's too late. The monster has already evolved into its adult form. It now has wings and its entire aura has changed. Knowing that they are about to get attacked, Mine asks Fate to stay behind her. These words hit something inside Fate. All his life he had been hiding behind others, but now he has someone that he wants to protect. He wants to be able to fight alongside Roxy and Mine and help them win. But clearly he's not strong enough for that. He can't even fully use his cursed skill. With all these thoughts running through his mind, Fate decides to take the next step. He tells Mine that he is going to get into Gluttony's half-starved state. That will give him the power boost needed to defeat Haniel. Greed and Mine both warn him that it's an extremely risky plan. If he goes too far, he might go into a fully starved state where gluttony can take over his mind. Fate says he's aware of the risks, but it's the only way. He needs the power of gluttony. So he evokes his prime skill and pretty soon he can feel the hunger. He wants to devour Haniel, and this half-starved state has turned him into an apex predator. With all his stats now getting a hefty boost, he asks Mind to get ready to launch a counterattack. Fate then goes to attack the newly evolved Mech Angel, but the monster releases hundreds of feathers. While Fate isn't scared of them, Mind warns him to not touch these feathers or else they'll explode. Avoiding so many incoming bombs would have been impossible for Fate earlier, but now with his hunger boost, it's a piece of cake. He moves like lightning and evades most of the feathers. He then proceeds to cut through the rest of them without getting caught up in the explosions, and he does all of it while jumping high up into the sky to get a better vantage point against the enemy. From this position, he asks Greed to give him one shot of Bloody Ptarmigan. The black sword takes its toll and releases the unholy energy that renders Haniel immobile. This gives Mind the perfect opportunity for an almighty attack. By putting all her strength into her weapon Sloth, she cuts down the monster in half as if it was made up of clay. The monster tries to regenerate, but Fate isn't done yet. He goes for its heart. Haniel creates an energy shield around its core to protect it, but Fate has a way to get through that. He brings out the black scythe to cut the shield, but it's not so easy. The shield is too strong. However, using his bloodthirsty eye, he can see the flow of energy through the shield. He finds the weakest point in it and attacks that point with his black scythe. The shield finally breaks apart, allowing Fate to attack the core. The monster puts his arms around the core as a last-ditch effort, but Fate cuts right through them. He even manages to hurt the woman at its core, but this is when the monster releases another burst of feathers. Fate is too close and he has to back off, otherwise he'll get blown up. His retreat gives Haniel a chance to fly away as it tries to regenerate. Fate doesn't want it to get away, but he can't jump that high up. But Mind has a plan. She asks Fate to get on her weapon, and before Fate can even get himself together, Mind flings him towards Haniel. Fate is wondering how he'll cut through the core when Greed gives him a choice. Fate can sacrifice 20% of his stats to get a special move that's even stronger than Bloody Ptarmigan. Since Fate is once again out of options, he takes the offer. Greed takes the stats and asks Fate to aim the scythe towards the core. But it looks like Fate isn't the only one who's going for the kill. Haniel forms a shield around Fate and itself. It then begins a process to burn everything inside that shield. Fate knows that he has to kill it right now or he'll die. Greed tells him to not miss his aim since he won't get another chance, and Fate obliges. He unleashes the power of his new move, Deadly Inferno, and stabs the core with his scythe. He then immediately activates Gluttony and starts consuming the monster's soul. He is taking in so many stats that he should go crazy with ecstasy, but instead, something else happens. He starts seeing the memories of the girl at Haniel's core. In these memories, he also sees a young Mind. These memories evoke a lot of sadness inside Fate, and he doesn't know why. This is when Greed tells him that the girl at the core also had a skill of mortal sin. She was just like Fate, and he feels awful because he just consumed one of his own kind. After finishing things up, Fate asks Mind if she knew that girl, but Mind says she doesn't remember anymore. She says that once someone is put inside a Mech Angel, they are not alive anymore. Since he's already completed Mind's request, Fate now wants to go to the Sentinel City and help Roxy. He knows that Mind has other plans, so he says goodbye to her. But before he leaves, he asks her for a favor. He wants her to promise that if he ever goes berserk, she'll kill him since only she has the power to do it. This request makes Mind emotional, and she hugs him before saying that she'll put him out of his misery if he loses control. However, since Fate has already used up pretty much all of his new stats to level up Greed, he might get killed anyway. After all, he's in the middle of Gallia and surrounded by all sorts of legendary monsters. Her words don't give Fate much confidence. Still, he gets on his to see how Roxy's doing. After walking through the wasteland for a couple of days, he gets to the mythical city of Babylon. It's situated between Gallia and Seafort and acts as a barrier against the horrifying monsters. The city is also extremely well protected. It has tall adamantine walls and only one gate. While Fate is walking towards the gate, he notices a lot of holy knights entering the city. Among them, Fate sees Roxy, and he's really happy to see that she looks shocked. He wants to talk to her, but instead hides himself. He spends the night in an inn to get some much-needed rest. The journey has been hard on his body. His gear has also reached its limit, and Fate decides to change it. Greed tells him to buy some custom-built gear since he really needs it. Fate likes the idea, but he's running out of money fast. So Greed tells him to take up some hunting job and make some quick money. Seeing as it might be his only option, Fate decides to check out the city. You can see a lot of adventurers and holy knights in the streets. Greed explains that the city is always getting attacked, so it hires mercenaries and adventurers for protection. The city also has dedicated districts. In one part, you can find merchants and adventurers. On the other side, you'll find accommodation, while nearly half the city is reserved for the headquarters of the Holy Knights. Greed says that laws don't really matter in a frontier town like this one. If you're strong, people will always welcome you here. Fate likes that since he doesn't want unwanted questions from officials. However, he still can't understand why it's so expensive. In only a day, he's down to his last 2 gold coins. Greed tells him that things are expensive in Babylon because they have to be transported from faraway places. That's why Fate has to pay 5 times the normal price for his stay at the inn. Once again, Greed advises him to just hunt some monsters if he's running out of money. So Fate decides to find a job. This is when he notices a big crowd outside a saloon. From the crowd, a beautiful girl emerges and looks right at him. Fate gets a strange feeling from her. He soon learns why. She's one of his kind and carries a skill of mortal sin. The girl comes up to him and says that she's been waiting for him. She takes him into the empty saloon and introduces herself as Eris. She says that she has the skill of lust and she's a guardian of the kingdom. She says that she has been keeping an eye on him for a long time now. She waited for him to awaken gluttony by killing someone. She then planted greed in his path because she wanted him to have that legendary weapon. She was about to meet him in the capital, but he left to follow Roxy. So Eris came to Babylon and started working as a saloon worker to meet Fate. She thanks him for slaying Hamiel, since that was the only mech angel that left the capital city. She says that there are 6 more eggs in the capital, but for the moment they are dormant. Everything she's saying makes Fate believe that she's trouble. It's clear that she's controlling the things from the shadows and he doesn't want to get involved with her. But it looks like he has no choice. Eris tells him about the Heavenly Dragon, which is quite simply the strongest monster in Gallia. It resides in domain of E and kills humans as well as other monsters. She tells him that Fate will likely come across this force of nature and will go berserk fighting it. But no matter what, Fate must not kill the dragon. It keeps the monsters in check by killing them. If Fate kills it, the kingdom will get overrun by smaller monsters. After giving this important warning, Eris finally tells Fate why she needed to talk to him. She says that as the guardian of the kingdom, she wants to ensure a prosperous future for it, no matter what she has to sacrifice. And right now, to guarantee a good future, Roxy has to die in Gallia. As soon as these words leave her mouth, Fate is burning with rage. He has to stop himself from attacking her. He asks her to explain how the hell can Roxy's death be good for the kingdom when she's probably the only holy knight who truly loves the country. Eris calmly asks him if he knows about the hate phenomenon. Fate has heard of it for sure. According to this phenomenon, the more monsters you kill, the more of them try to take revenge on you. So your action of killing a monster leads to another one hating your guts. But after a day, this hate is gone and you are no longer the prime target for these monsters. However, not all of the hatred goes away. A tiny bit of this emotion gets left behind each day. After thousands of years, this residual hate gives birth to special monsters known as the crowned beasts. According to Eris, hate phenomenon also exists among humans. In recent centuries, the common people have begun to hate the proud holy knights. This hatred is now at a tipping point. If Roxy, who's loved by most people, dies in this campaign, the hatred will go over the edge. This will result in the birth of more and more humans with special skills. These special people save the kingdom from the tyrannical order of the Holy Knights and lead it into a prosperous future. Her theory is wild and Fate wants nothing to do with it. He only knows that he won't let Roxy die, so he leaves Eris after telling her to fuck off. He spends the rest of the day hunting orcs. He's in such a bad mood that even consuming monsters is not making him happy. Still, he keeps slaying them like a machine. He's also collecting their ears to get the bounty for the hunt. His hunt, however, gets interrupted by a group of holy knights. They are led by Alistair, who works under Roxy's command. Fate can sense that Alistair is a vile human being even without talking to him. Alistair compliments Fate's strength and asks Fate to work for him. Fate makes it clear that he's not going to work for anyone, but Alistair says that Fate will change his mind eventually. Fate doesn't know why, but he can feel that Alistair is a threat to him. He's really worried because such a guy is working for Roxy who's already in so much danger. He's thinking about it as he drops 2 sacks full of orc ears. While the clerk is nervously counting those ears, other adventurers can't believe their eyes. They don't like that Fate took out all the orcs in the area. They try to pick a fight with him and Fate doesn't react kindly. He's already having a rough day and all his stress causes him to beat the shit out of these guys. He feels bad about it later on. His mood, however, gets better when the clerk hands him 100 gold coins for the hunt. Fate's thinking about going to the armory to buy some new gear when suddenly Roxy bursts through the door and confronts him. She's mad at him for causing trouble for the staff, but she forgives him since he was only defending himself. While she's talking to him, Fate is busy looking at her. He has missed her and is happy to hear her voice. Still, he has to hide his identity and he introduces himself as Corpse. For a moment, Roxy feels that she knows him, but before she can ask him any questions, he gets out. That evening, Roxy receives some worrying news. One of her squadrons is in danger and she needs to save them. So she leaves to fight the monsters outside the city. However, things are worse than she imagined and her company is soon surrounded by multiple crowned beasts and she's losing men fast. One of the salamander monsters tries to take her out, but this is when Fate shows up to save her, and she feels happy to see him again. And that's how the first part of this manhwa ends. Well guys, if you like this video and you want a second part, comment below with the word part 2, also subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell and like the video. But most important, leave a comment. Until the next video.